Dear and respected members of the audience and all the stalwarts seated on the stage, I consider it my privilege to be here at the invitation of the 𝒤𝒊𝒃 Centenary Committee and to be a witness to this great gathering in memory of 𝒤𝒊𝒃, who is our pride, who is our great intellectual, great artist, who lived here in this city and worked here, who loved humanity, who loved people, who loved everything in the nature that is reflected in his work. As his name suggests, he was Satyajit, the truth prevails. It's very, very true of Satyajit Roy. He was a realist, he was a romanticist, he was a humanist. Very often he is referred to as a neo-realist, to which I personally do not agree. He was a realist of the highest order, not of the superficial realist, but of the innermost that he brought out through his visuals and sounds. He was a consummate artist, and I remember there's an opinion gathering done by the celebrated magazine Sight and Sound, published from London by the British Film Institute. They keep doing a survey, in fact a ballot survey of people's preferences, the best 10 films made in every decade. I happen to be one of those who voted. It is done amongst the filmmakers. And every time I chose the 10 best films that I consider great, the first name was always Pather Panchali. Only after that title came other films from other countries. It has remained on top for me all these years. I was talking at a very small function that preceded here to a small number of member of audiences that I had seen Pather Panchali in 1958, a 16mm print of the film, and it was introduced by my professor in the Gandhigram Rural Institute. He said, here is a film which was made by a student from Shantiniketan. So he was an unknown name. He was a student from Shantiniketan, and it was his first film. And professor told me, he also told me that he has won some award outside the country. So with that introduction, I watched the film, and those were the days when there was no subtitling. The film was, of course, in Bengali, and then I could not follow what was talked in the film, what was talked between the characters. I never followed. But what attracted me was, I've never seen a film before that where the characters none of the characters ever used any makeup. They looked very real, very, very credibly real. And there was, I remember still again the face of the old woman, a distant relative of the household, who had very deep cut marks on her face. And with old age in it, the face had already shrunk and she could hardly walk around, but then I still remember the kind of lullaby she was singing, and also she was singing to herself about the long journey. Now it is time to come to an end. So this was, for me, it was a completely different experience, although I did not understand what was really going on, but I understood that this man was a priest, his wife and the children. The children themselves were of great interest, although again the nuances of the dialogues were lost. But it was a really different experience for me. None of the films I have seen before looked like Father Panchayat. It was very distinctly different. The music was fantastic. I remember it was Ravi Shankar. And then that was the first encounter I had with Satyajit Roy's work. Later, when I became a student of cinema, I saw Father Panchayat several times, sequence-wise, with dialogue, without dialogue, with music, without music. And it was analyzed threadbare, and it became part of my film culture. And then there followed wonderful films, although my first choice was Father Panchayat. Once I talked to Manikda, I told him, when we were talking about films that were popular, etc. So I said, I like your, I asked him which is your choice, your best film according to you. Then I will reserve the name. Then he asked me, what is your preference of my films? Which one do you prefer? I said, my choice, I like all of your films, but the most liked film for me was Aparajito. I said, why he asked me? Because it's a great film, first of all. Secondly, it talks about this mother and son relationship unexplored by anybody, no one else, either in literature or in cinema. This was the unique experience I had about the son growing up and with the father always being on trips outside in search of a living. So this film was for me my favorite for other reasons also, because I could see my mother in this Karuna Banerjee's role. These are very personal relations. I later came to know that it was also the favorite film of Mrinal Sen, Mrinalda, and also Hrithik Kattak. It was very interesting. As a student in Pune Institute, Kattak would screen his own films and talk about it, but then he would also screen Ray's films. And I particularly remember he is showing sequences from Aparajito and telling us, the students, here is great cinema. So they had a lot of respect for each other, and unlike what has been rumored around, they were not enemies. They had a lot of respect for each other. Ray used to consider Kattak as someone who had cinema running in his veins. So fortunately I had a very, very close relationship with Satyajit Ray and also Mrinal Sen. So this was a very, very, very special advantage I had, and I used to show my films to Satyajit Ray, and right from my second film until I made my last film in 1990. He saw every film, and he used to encourage me with his comments, and so I am very particularly indebted to him for the consideration and the love he gave me. Even amongst international filmmakers, internationally known big filmmakers, well-known stalwarts of cinema, he stands tall, not physically but intellectually. Only recently I read Scorsese commenting on Ray and the impact he had on him. It was Scorsese and some of the other couple of other Hollywood filmmakers who took up the restoration of Ray's films, and fortunately for us, they have been very beautifully restored and preserved. So it's our great heritage. What he has left with us is a lasting influence on our culture and our lives. So even when an artist is no more, his work lives on. This is true of Satyajit Ray. And I am very particularly honored to talk about him at this function, because all of you, it's such a large crowd of people have gathered here in admiration of Ray, the tallest, the highest, the greatest filmmaker of our times, and we were all very fortunate to be living with him, sharing his legacy. Let me share with you the joy and pride of having known Ray, having imbibed the greatness of this artist. Thank you very much.